This essay example, as well as thousands of others, is available in text format on our website for free and without registration. Simply Google Ivy Panda Free Essays.
Intro. Critical thinking involves making a decision based on the identification and thorough evaluation of the available evidence. A critical thinker makes his decisions based on a comprehensive and in-depth analysis of the evidence and thereafter communicates the beliefs accurately and clearly. Robert Hugh Ennis, in his book The Cornell Critical Thinking Tests, defines critical thinking as the ability to think reasonably and reflectively. A critical thinker is open-minded and considers and explores as many possibilities as possible. Critical thinking. Critical thinking is sometimes contradictory and needs a lot of integrity. Critical thinkers do not take things at face value because the most accepted and common ideals are not usually correct. Critical thinking allows someone to question his own ideas as they might be wrong. Critical thinkers realize that the concept of right or wrong is transitory, and what might have been right yesterday might be proved wrong the next time. Critical thinking argues that every idea might be good as long as it has strong evidence that supports it. Generally, most intellectuals argue that extremists cannot be critical thinkers because critical thinking does not insist on an idea being right. Critical thinking has been of help to many disciplines, including education and managerial communication. There are several processes that are involved in developing critical thinking skills. The first stage involves taking the information that you have read, heard, or seen. From the information, a person tries to understand it by taking the key arguments, points, assumptions, and the presented evidence. Based on the evidence and arguments, a critical thinker analyzes it by examining how the key components relate to each other or fit. After comparison, the ideas are synthesized through different sources of information brought together to build an idea or argument. Critical thinking is the most important form of thinking when it comes to decision-making and problem-solving. In managerial communication, critical thinking is vital in the sense that managers have to be influential decision-makers. Their decisions should be imaginative and well-reasoned. Applying the techniques of critical thinking allows them to solve complex problems. Critical thinking is also the logical method applied by ordinary people to the everyday world. This is deemed to be a certainty since the act of critical thinking tries to duplicate the methods used for investigation, which are, a question is identified, a theory formulated, important information sought and gathered, the plan logically tested and evaluated, and reliable conclusions are drawn from the outcome. All of the skills of scientific research are matched by critical thinking, which is, therefore, nothing more than a methodical method used in everyday life rather than in specific scientific activities. A scientifically knowledgeable individual, for example, a mathematics lecturer, has learned to think critically to reach that level of scientific alertness. Basic techniques of critical thinking could be used by any smart individual course which has attained a certain level of education, which is a prerequisite to logical and critical thinking. Critical thinking is also the method of applying articulate thinking to a subject. Cogan goes on to expound and explain that acquiring critical thinking skills helps an individual to develop experienced arguments and draw out the inferences that may be needed to use in his or her coursework and projects. The idea's worthiness is then evaluated based on how relevant it is to the thinker's needs. The evidence is also evaluated based on its relation to other related ideas. The final process in critical thinking involves the justification of the argument. The argument is developed, the conclusions are made, and possible implications and inferences are made. Ennis points out that during critical analysis, critical thinkers scrutinize tribulations, ask questions, create new answers, and find out new information that can be used for good or bad, question establishments and conventional values, and challenge received doctrines. Good scientists who conduct science must practice critical thinking. This is because it helps a person to be mindful and open-minded about alternatives. It helps a person to identify problems, make assumptions, reason well, and identify conclusions. According to Ennis, critical thinking helps students in their doctorate studies because they help in their research projects and assignments. When writing a research project, critical thinking helps the student to identify an argument, evaluate credible sources, and be able to judge them. The students are able to judge the quality of the argument, evaluate the assumptions, accept the reasons, and also analyze the evidence. Critical thinking helps doctorate students develop and defend reasonable positions well. Through critical thinking, students can create and plan for experiments well on top of formulating plausible hypotheses. It also helps in the definition of appropriate terms that match the context and cautions students on the warranted conclusions. Relevancy also plays a great role in that an individual who critically analyzes a situation and properly gives back credible and reasonable assumptions and conclusions is therefore deemed to be a smart and appropriate critical thinker. Conclusion: a good critical thinker in business management and doctorate studies should be able to gain evidence and use it impartially and skillfully. He should also organize ideas articulately and coherently. He should be able to distinguish between invalid and logically valid inferences and suspend any judgment that does not have sufficient evidence. A good critical thinker should differentiate between rationalizing and reasoning. Critical thinking allows someone to anticipate the probable consequences of an alternative argument. It helps individuals learn independently and, most of all, enables an individual to recognize the fallibility of their opinions, recognize their biases, and the danger involved in using personal preferences in weighing evidence. Did you like this "What is Critical Thinking" sample? To get more works like this one, make sure to check out the free database of academic paper examples at ivypanda.com. You will find thousands of samples for all your study needs, without even having to register.